Okay, thank you for coming back for Chapter 4 of Walker Street Shipyards. Before we do our deeper dive into the Shuttlebay and deeper regions of the Shuttlebay and more stuff, I thought we would go to the rec deck for mail call, take a look at some of the new aftermarket parts that have come in the last few days. So from Shapeways, we have this replacement bridge dome. Shapeways is the company that I ordered the replacement officer's lounge. So this bridge dome is going to be a better piece than the stock piece because it supposedly has more accurate detail, which I can tell it does in this section here, which I know may be really hard to see. But the main thing is that it has these raised portions here that the stock piece doesn't, that will allow more of the floodlights from the bridge area to spill out onto the registry markings of the saucer. The next piece from Laser Fire Creations in Ohio is this, which is a diffusion disc, an opaque diffusion disc that drops into the deflector dish and will diffuse the amber and blue light that comes through there. I used this on the first Enterprise build that I did for the blue light, the blue LED bulb light, and it has a really great effect. I'm going to try to reproduce that. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to work. But first, I'm going to do a shout out to my local hobby company, the New Brooklyn Railroad and Hobby Store, which is where I get all of the Tamiya paints for this kit. Occasionally they give away freebies, including these great little hobby lights. They also give away these big ones, which are really cool and do a really great job of lighting up. I use them extensively for the Shuttlebay. But let's see if I can reproduce the diffusion effect from this. And I know it's probably not going to reproduce well. Hopefully you can see you've got a really nice hotspot dead in the center. You've got a nice halo around the outside, and then sort of a diffused light from the interior that radiates out. It really looks great with the blue light that I used last time, and I'm hoping it's really going to work as well with the blue and then the changing amber of the deflector dish light this time. And then last we have from JT Graphics this set of aftermarket decals. These are the registry markings to replace the stock decals, which for the most part are terrible and problematic. This is your main saucer numbering, which I'll use the NCC 1701 because I really don't go for that ABC nonsense. And then some of the other markings, these go along the side of the secondary hull. These go on the back of your nacelles. These little squares go around all of your emergency lifeboats, from the top of the saucer. And these are one of the most nightmare-inducing decals that you get with the stock kits. These are the little docking port decals that go around the docking ports. where the travel pods will connect, as well as the long distance shuttle connects on the back of the bridge, like we saw when Spock arrived in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. These things were an absolute nightmare. You could get them out of the water and they'd be solid, and as soon as you place them as carefully as possible onto the hull, they would just crack apart and drift into different pieces. They were almost impossible to push back together. Little tiny sections of them would just drift off. They were an absolute nightmare, and it was just one of those things where you really want to go, come on, Polar Lights. So I'm looking forward to using these aftermarket decals from JT Graphics, and hoping that they will hang together better and not be as problematic. So once again, let's go deeper into the Shuttlebay and see what's next. So on replay, I can see that trying to reproduce that diffusion effect in the deflector dish with the laser fire diffuser disc didn't work as well. So I'm going to try to reproduce it a little bit differently, and hope you can at least get some idea of how it looks from a distance. I think that you can sort of see here how there is a nice halo around the disc. There's a hot spot that's in the center of the diffusion disc, and then the light sort of radiates outward. I know it's really a difficult thing to reproduce, but hopefully this will give you a slightly better idea of how that diffusion disc works. Well, I know I said earlier that I was probably going to skip doing the cargo boxes for the Shuttlebay, but they just look so cool. The photo etch pieces just look so cool, and the HDA graphic decals just really look so awesome that I just want to go ahead and do them. I want to see what they look like, and I'll just have to figure out how I'm going to implement them into the design of the kit, even though I know when you put them down onto the floor of that Shuttlebay, you'll never be able to see them once the kit is complete. But maybe I can do something different. Maybe I'll just, I don't know, stack them up on the base. I just really want to see what they look like. So here are your Paragraphics parts, photo etch parts, and I have given them a coat of Tamiya fine white primer, and then given them a coat of Tamiya flat clear. As the directions say, the next step will be to put on the HDA decals and then to fold them. Maybe you're supposed to fold them before you put the decals on, but I really don't see how that would work. So I'm going to apply a decal, give them a chance to dry, and then fold them and see how that works. And I will be folding them for the very first time, almost live here on this very YouTube build series channel, Walker Street Shipyards, pre-recorded for your time zone. Alright, I'm ready to undertake my first stab at folding photo etch parts into place. And first off, I've got to say that I am really in love with HDA Model Works decals. These things are very durable and very easy to work with, and even better, they give you extras on their decal sheets. A lot of the decals they will give you extra sets. Some of the larger ones, like the floor markings for the Shuttlebay landing area and cargo area, you only get one set. But really, as durable and easy to use as these are, that's probably all you need. And it is a far cry better than those very temperamental, very prone to breaking Polar Lights stock decals. So on the back of each of these, you'll see that there's etch lines, which are the fold lines. Here's the directions that's on the instruction sheet. Not exactly what I would call extremely informational, but they do kind of give you a diagram of what's supposed to happen. So I am going to be folding along these etched panel lines. Now, they do make a, believe it or not, photo etch folding tool, which I may end up getting. The rec deck piece is a very large piece with several different elements that fold in and maybe even fold in at different angles, and so I think I'm going to need all the help I can get with that. But for these, I'm going to go with 2 different straight edges. I'm going to do everything I can to keep this in frame and in focus for everyone. So I've got this thin metal straight edge and this thin metal piece here, and I'm going to very carefully fold that at a 90-degree angle. That went well. Go to the next fold line, fold up at another 90-degree angle, and we are getting there. This thing is beginning to look kind of boxy. Go back again, fold up, then very gently squeeze them together, then fold your end pieces in, and that, fellow Starship builders, is your first cargo box. I'm going to do some finessing to tuck in these end pieces, but I like the fact that all the fold elements are staying in place. So I'm going to go on to these other 2, get them folded, and be right back. I know I've been going on a bit about how temperamental and brittle and frustrating the stock Polar Light decals are, but this is a great example of what you're up against. So this decal right here for this particular cargo bay door, I had noticed that there was a little bit of a slight crack and a portion that had not laid down 100%. Now keep in mind, these went down with microset that was dried, then given a coat of microsol to help bond them further with the base, then given a coat of flat sealer. And then I saw that there was a little bit of flaking going on yesterday, so I applied a little bit more microsol, pressed it down, it looked fine, let it dry, and then somehow overnight came back and discovered that a portion of it had just flaked and gone away. I guess because there was a fan on or something at some point, it blew away. This reminds me of what it was like with those little round circles, little round red circles that go around the navigation lights on different parts of the kit, such as around the top of the saucer and on the ends of the nacelles. There are a few of them that I swear that I had laid down, I had set and sealed and given a coat of sealer, and then come back the next day and they had cracked apart and drifted away. And here we are again. I don't remember these cargo bay door decals being this problematic in the first build, but here we are, right at the front, right at the front end of this build, and we're already having a lot of trouble. Great example of the fact that this kit fights you at every step of the build. Now, these that I had actually gone in and trimmed the edges, laid down a bit easier, and held together a bit better. This one right here has cracked a little bit, but I don't believe you're going to see it. So these two center doors, these three across the tops, are the ones that when you get the kit together and you look down through the Shuttlebay, are the ones you really see the most. So you really want them to come out the best. I don't know that you'll see this little crack. I think I'm going to try to touch some of this up with paint. Hope that I can overcome that look. I know that I had mentioned seeing a set of cargo bay door decals in the past, and a little bit further research, I see that HDA Model Works used to offer them, but they don't stock them anymore. Perhaps with a little bit more research, I can find another company that does. If anyone knows of a company and would like to post them in comments, or maybe we can just send some emails to HDA and say, can you guys put these things back on the market? In the meantime, if you're at your stage of the build that you want to finish your shuttle bay, you want to get these cargo bay doors, then what I recommend is before you set them, trim the edges. They'll fit a lot better, and then just use a lot of care, and hopefully they'll seal well and you won't have this problem. Well, what for you guys has been the length of a single edit, for me has been about 5 weeks, as I have really gone deep in doing the shuttle bay and spending a lot of time on a lot of really fine details, a little bit more than I had intended, and I'm a little bit behind the curve on where I wanted to be at this point. But I've sort of gotten obsessive with doing things that in the end, maybe you'll just never see. But I'm mostly pleased with the way it's turned out. I have gotten to the point that I've glued the end piece and this side piece in place, and now really have to make up my mind as to how I'm going to position some of the different ships. As you can see, there are a lot of ships that come with this. There are your 6 work bees, your 2 deep space shuttles, and your 2 inter-system shuttles. There's also the 2 travel pods, which I have just not gotten to. You know, when I built my first kit, I wasn't going to do them at all, and it's at the very, very end of that build that I finally decided to do them. So I'll get to them, but with as much time as I've devoted to all of this other stuff, I just haven't gotten to the travel pods yet. So some of the things that have taken me a lot of time, I probably redid the turbo lifts about 3 different times before I finally settled in on a color scheme that I liked. I actually had ordered these from Shapeways with the intention that I would try to like the turbo lifts like a lot of builders do, and like I didn't do on my first build. And I experimented with some different things. I've experimented with fiber optics. I've experimented with 1.8 millimeter LED bulbs, and I just never got a look that I was completely satisfied with. These Shapeway parts are not quite as detailed as the kit parts, which are clear parts, and some people actually find a great way to light them. I just, in the end, got tired of spending so much time noodling around with that and decided to go with just a standard paint job on them. I've tried to hew close to the paint scheme that you see in the Shuttlebay, but in the end really wanted to have something that is going to stand out when you go looking down through the length of the Shuttlebay. At one point they were white and these bands were brown, which actually is very close to the coloring as you see them in the Shuttle Bay scene and the cargo bay scene in Star Trek The Motion Picture. But after a few days, I just decided I didn't like that look at all, and ended up going with sort of a composite of a little bit of the coloration from what you see in the movie and a little bit of the coloration based on what I think is really going to stand out. Now, I'm going to try to turn this, and there's some things about the Shuttlebay that are fun, but also sort of frustrating, because in the end you've got these great decals here down on the floor that you will never see. When the kit's done, of course you look through here the landing bay, and you can see all the way down to this wall, which that's why I think it's important to have some type of focal element here. Last time I put a little red work bee there and glued it in place. This time I put a little cargo pod, but you don't see this level at all. You don't see this really cool blue decal at all. Anything that you put in there, you're not going to see it. So if you decide you're going to put one of these little things, you won't see that. If you decide that you're going to put any little cargo holders, you won't see those either, which is sort of a shame. You can barely see this tail end of this really colorful cargo area decal, which is a shame. And then, like I said before, I think that this deep down in the garage that you don't really see these cargo bay doors, which is a shame. I think this is the cargo bay right here where they keep all the lawn maintenance equipment. So it's a tricky thing trying to figure out how you're going to utilize all these cool little ships. One of the things that I did in my first build was I put one of the shuttles right here on the stand clear, and I didn't put anything else here on this end, and a few little work bees here like in these little bays. And it looks great, and you can like stand back from the ship and look down this way, and you can see this sitting here, and it's great. But it also obscures your view looking all the way back in here. So I think for this build, I am not going to have any of the larger ships glued down in place, and just when I want to, I can slide them in. I will glue down some of these little work bees, which you have to do before you put the other side, and certainly the top. One of the things that I was very pleased with, an experiment that came out pretty well, is that I did, let's see if I can get a really good shot of this, is I glued this hatch in an open position. Not really quite sure what I'm going to end up doing with that, but I think it looks pretty cool. So a lot of the photo etch looks great. The girders look great. The side rails look great. They did take a lot of time. I experimented with doing the little guys. You have these tiny, tiny little figures. I was never really happy with them. I've only seen one or two builds where I thought they looked well. The problem is they're static, they don't move, and I think they more destroy the illusion than add to the illusion. But I decided to give them a try, and I spent about a week painting them and trying to put them into place, but in the end I just wasn't happy with the way they look, and I'm not going to use them in the Shuttlebay. I still may implement one or two of those tiny little guys in the officer's lounge, and possibly the Arboretum. There's a really cute couple who are walking holding hands, which I think will look great in the Arboretum, but I'll just have to see when I get to that part. Now, like I said, doing the Shuttlebay, actually it takes a lot of time, but it is in many ways a small victory right at the beginning of the build. The Shuttlebay is really its own little model kit. I mean, look at all this cool stuff that comes with it, particularly if you get the photo etch cargo pieces, which again I have no idea really where to put them, because again you really won't see them, and it's a small victory right at the very beginning of the build, because it ends up looking pretty cool. The decaling came out pretty cool. It was a very time-consuming process. That's one of the things that ate up a lot of the 5 weeks that I delved into kitting out the Shuttlebay. The HDA Model Works Aftermarket decals really did a great job for a lot of these little ships. There is some great design on the Aftermarket decals on the top of your long-range shuttles. Also the photo etch on the back of the long-range shuttles, little hatchways, really look fantastic. These tiny, tiny little black spots on the work bees, I think, are the hatches to lead in, and these were very tedious and very mind-bending. But again, the windshields, the registry markings, and the things like that on your little work bees really look fantastic. Now, as much as I have nattered on about the stock Polar Lights decals, they actually, oddly enough, came in to save the day on this shuttle right here when I was first doing it. Let's see if I can get in for a closer shot. The HDA Model Works specifics say to use a high gloss spray sealant, which is the best surface for their decals to bond with. And I, unfortunately, when I was ready to do the decaling, I was out of my spray high gloss Tamiya paint, and so I got a little impatient, which is never a good thing, and I used some Vallejo brush on high gloss, which I had used for figure kits and worked out very well, and thought that it would do just fine. So I brushed on a couple coats of high gloss on this shuttle, let it dry, let it cure, and then placed the HDA Model Works decal for the number 5, and it hit the surface and immediately crumpled up. The 5 just wadded up into a big mass, and I was never able to smooth it out. And so I finally just had to scrape it off and abandon it and throw it away. Finally get some, high gloss spray, spray it, and then start all over with the decals. But then I was down the number 5 decal, and I used the Polar Lights stock decals, which are identical to the HDA, or I guess the HDA are identical to the stock decals. And as much as I had gone on about them, this little one right here, this number 5, laid down just perfectly with no problem. The rest of the decals for this shuttle are the HDA. Now, another area which, again, the stock decals came in and saved me, was this yellow one right here at the stand clear landing strip. So the HDA yellow decal, I cut a small portion off to test it to see how it would come out, and it was almost transparent when I laid it down on this medium gray floor of your landing bay. It was very transparent, you could see right through it, and it didn't stand out. So I ended up not using the HDA, and again turned to the stock Polar Lights decal, which looked fantastic. It has really a lot of pop against that gray. I'm not giving it a total pass because one of the things that's so frustrating about those stock decals is any type of really fine little line like this that exists by itself. I mean, these things, as they were still on the transfer sheet, when I brought them out of the water before I even tried to move them off, they cracked into little teeny pieces and floated around. I was able to stitch some of it together, but these pieces actually should have extended like down to here. But still, for the most part, oddly enough, the stock decal sheets came in a few places and helped out. So the next portion of what I'll do is, again, I am not going to glue down any of the larger spacecraft because when I put one right here and glued it down last time, it really obscured a lot of what you can see down through in here. So I am going to glue a few of these work bees like in these little bays and maybe along in here. Of course, glue the turbo lifts in place, and then bring in the other side piece. Which will go right here. Now, after you get your side pieces in place, and again, this one is already glued and the back piece is glued, you have to come back from behind. I'm going to use perfect plastic putty to come in behind. These gaps right here, they're really bad light leak. A lot of lights will come flooding in through here. So I'll putty all of that. And then the next step will be, after I finish painting it, put the top in place. Now, one of the things that I have to give a lot of credit to the Polar design team is the design for this piece here and the way the clear parts, which this one fits right in here, this one fits right in here, light up the shuttle bay. If you use, oops, I lost one of my turbo lifts. This is your top of your secondary hull, the strong back top, and if you run a section of LED strip lights right here, it'll be right above your shuttle bay, and then again down through your transparent pieces, really do a great job of lighting up the shuttle bay. So that's some good work on the part of the Polar Light design team. One of the things I do suggest, however, is you'll go ahead and glue down your top piece, of course, but don't glue these pieces in yet, because when you finally get to the point, and we'll talk about it when I'm finishing up the secondary hull, when you finally get to the point that you are maneuvering the shuttle bay into place, depending on how you construct your secondary hull, if you construct the sides and the bottom and then bring your shuttle bay in from the front, which is how I did it the first time, there is really not a lot of wiggle room, not a lot of space with the support pieces that run across the top of that secondary hull to hold those pieces together, and you barely have enough room to get these through. So if you leave them out, this top will slide in a lot easier. And once the shuttle bay is in place, then you can clip them in place. You really don't even need to glue them. They snap in pretty well. There's not a lot of torque forces trying to pull against them, so you can snap them in. Now, one of the other things that I have spent so much time on and still really nowhere near finished is the officer's lounge, and I'm struggling to get a good focus on it. So I have painted and reprimed and repainted this one at least twice, trying to find a color scheme that I like. At first I used these bright blue lines right here. They were a little too candy colored, didn't like them. Then I went with a tan brown, didn't like that, and repainted it. Now I'm pretty pleased with this, but I'm still not entirely pleased with the color. I may go with, instead of a gray floor, go with a tan floor, but I've got some more work to do. This is a little like koi pond, so I have to finish out the water effects on that, put some plants in here, and all of that. So still got a little bit of work to do on the officer's lounge, and I haven't even started on the arboretum yet. But I'm kind of getting a little bit impatient with the fiddly stuff, and I really want to crack on with the larger pieces. And so I'll continue to do the fine detail work on the Shuttlebay, of course sealing it all up, and of course continue to work on the officer's lounge. But I'm ready to get back to work on the saucer. My next steps for the saucer will be to use the photo etch windows for the back of the officer's lounge, also the photo etch windows that will go in place on the sides of the secondary hull outside the arboretum. That's how I'm going to start out chapter 5, and I may even get into a little bit of soldering and start working on the wiring. So thank you for getting me through to the end of chapter 4. We'll see you in chapter 5.